week. I'm sure a lot of the questions over the next week are going to be about Fru, so I figure I might as well make a few statements here, and I'm going to be doing standalone videos on them as well. It's the most fun I've had doing a raid progression in this game in a very long time. It was more fun to prog than DSR, more fun than top, and the fight itself, while definitely on the easier side, I feel like especially player skills gone up to the point where unless it's really as grueling as top, I don't think we're going to have any crazy long progs again. And I don't know if I really want to have a top-esque prog again. But that doesn't change the fact that it definitely, one of my raid members, Chitter, says absolute cinema, peak cinema. It was fast paced. Like by the time I was 13 minutes into the fight, it's like time had vanished going into that final phase, in the 13, 14 minute mark. And that makes everything that you accomplish feel really, really good. So I think it was the palate cleanser that Final Fantasy XIV needed after top in terms of ultimate. I do think that it's going to mean a lot of people are going to join like second groups, third groups, reprog groups, reclear groups, PF, discords. I think it's going to be a very active ultimate. And may even be the new ultimate that I say could be your first one. I think it's just enough like designed like current stuff is, so you're getting very modern experience without really being downscaled. Like T, UCOB, Uwu, like we've just outscaled that content like a lot. Even though it's still challenging, still ultimate, I'm not going to take anything away from that. You jump from those to DSR and top, and there's no in between. This is the in between. And that means that if you're kind of already like someone who's performing well in Savage but hasn't stepped into Ultimate, it becomes a really good stepping stone into modern design. That really is one of also the best things that plays with like 1 minute burst windows and 2 minute buffs. I was so comfortable the whole fight. I never once worried about the 2 minute meta literally the entire time. It was never once a thought or even like not a complaint and not even a thought. That's crazy, especially with how much of a discussion the design of the 2 minute meta has been over the last several years. That's impressive. There's still definitely problems with it. I'm going to be discussing a lot of that in various other videos, but very positive experience. And I had a great time with my team, and I'm looking forward to doing re-clears and picking up the weapons. And like I said, I'll probably join reprog groups and all that. Curious to see what they do for the next one, and also curious to see how Chaotic goes later this month. So that's just a few general statements about it. I'm sure that there's some people in the comment section already who know that I've cleared it and have asked questions. And I'm sure there's going to be questions for it next week, even with all of those statements. And there probably will be for weeks to come. But you know what? That's what the weekly Q&A is about. I can't expect everyone to have seen this for every single video, or to not have questions, or to just not be curious or whatever. So I'm sure I'll still be answering questions about that for weeks and weeks to come. But anyway, let's get into the Q&A and see if my predictions are right. So thanks to everyone for asking questions. Don't forget, you can ask questions in the comment section of the video below. Thanks to the sponsors over on Patreon for supporting. Nobody has to support. None of my content is paywalled or pay-gated or anything. It's just an option. And I just like to thank people at the start of videos. So let's get into it. This one is from earlier today, so yeah, I can already see that it's going to be about the Fru stuff. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Good day, Mr. Haps. Congrats on your Fru clear. I have a few questions in case you're not making a thoughts video. I am, but like the weekly Q&A is still here. Like, again, I can't expect everyone to watch every video I've ever made, to know everything I've ever thought, and it's just the whole point. I answer the same questions all the time, so it's irrelevant. Consider it a peek. And I might have just answered it in that intro. I guess we'll find out in a second. One takeaway from Fru in the world race: the fight was turned out to be considerably easier, and the world first took 3 to 4 fewer days compared to DSR and top. How did you personally feel about the difficulty? I feel like some of it's player skill. I feel like some of it is the general design was more straightforward. I think a lot of people have this really weird thought that like ultimates are very puzzle heavy. We haven't really had a puzzle heavy ultimate since DSR. DSR, like the Hush Font section, there was really only like 1 or 2 ways that was going to go. And tank LB, heal LB, or like DPS LB, like killing, because people very quickly noticed that we only had 2 LB bars in phase 1 and that we had 3 during the transition. It was not a real puzzle. And then the whole like Thornton kneeling over thing, like that was basically figured out by accident. Like it wasn't like anyone beat double dragons after killing Thornton and was like, oh man, we screwed up. What did we do wrong? Basically everyone had it figured out before double dragons was even beaten, by accident even, because it was like limping through Thornton and then him doing the thing where he flies away. So it's like there's no puzzle there. And top, it was not even a puzzle. It was just people thought blue screen might be a puzzle. It wasn't. It was a DPS check. And then people thought, like everyone was trying to make puzzles out of stuff in DSR and top because of T. And they ended up just being really straightforward. Like the Dynamis hopping isn't a puzzle so much as you get the debuff and you very quickly figure out that you get what's it called? 24 total jumps and there's 8 players. Like that's just math at that point. So again, there wasn't really a puzzle on top either. It was just very mechanically challenging. This is very, very straightforward. Lots of downtime phases, lots of just direct stuff. And the puzzle also was just kind of a logical thing to figure out. It was very akin to like, you're more likely to figure out the puzzle before it matters than you are to figure it out after it matters. Like with Uwu and T, where people would get it to the later phase and be like, what the hell did we do wrong? And that's fine. So the difficulty, I think, again, was really good. I think it's still lower than DSR even mechanically, but I feel like they focused on fast and fun over like grueling and difficult. Is DPS check in each phase appropriate? It would be if Picto didn't exist. That's going to be in the video. Pictomancer affords you a lot of errors. Now, how do you feel about some of the mechanics being simpler or less random? That's pretty normal, actually. Unless you do a top-esque situation, mechanics are very rarely that like if you look at DSR. DSR doesn't really have a whole lot of randomness. There's the meteors in Thornton, and I guess Raw Flame debuffs. And other than that, it's pretty straightforward. It was just very mechanically challenging. If you did DSR before this came out, like this was always going to be a breeze. Unless you do something like top where there's so many possible variations, like figuring out who needed to do what in Run Dynamis Omega was it literally all they did was give you like you've done 2 Dynamis simulations at that point, Run Dynamis mechanics. So you know who has what number of buffs. And then you need to take the people who are marked for the first and second hops and Run Dynamis Omega. And with those debuffs alone, figure out who needs to be targeted by what in that point. And while you're doing that uptime mechanic, which is why people opted into manual marking in week 1 and why AM became a thing in the later weeks. So it's really a case of they just give you all of the information you need. It's a lot of debuff juggling here, which the more debuff juggling and the more elements you add, it effectively creates restrictions on how many possible permutations can be done, which then simplifies things, even if what they're asking for is still absolute perfection. So that's a lot of the thing. It's probably for the better. I think you can have some top-esque mechanics, and I think you should have a lot of DSR-esque mechanics, and this veers on the side of DSR-style mechanics. I predicted, because I thought this was going to be DSR-esque, and because DSR already exists, this will not take as long as DSR. While I was still off on the amount of time it took, that definitely still feels like what they did. Like less random. Oh, like P1 has no light aspected ether attacks. Yeah, I don't know what they could have done interesting with light, because light's mechanics are not very interesting. I mean, I'm not going to say fire and lightning are either, but like a debuff that explodes, you can just, deal damage, I guess. I don't know what else you would have done with that other than just stack 2 of them and make the damage really, really high. The other thing is roll stacks, which, okay, that's not really that much more interesting than what we have either, unless you're going to change the rule. And then the wait and go. So it's like Fatebreaker is already notorious for being a very direct fight, and it seems like they just focused in on the parts of that were important. Like, for example, let's say with FOF, let's say if FOF did roll spreads, that would suddenly add a limitation to FOF. If you get a light marker on somebody, it's you're forced to solve that a certain way, which means that everything else in that phase effectively has to also work to allow that to happen. So it would actually even make the tether phase, like other than tracking a third type of tether, it would make it almost easier in a sense. So like that's the thing. Sometimes adding more limits the amount of things the fight can do. And I think that lesson is just kind of learned here in that first section. In the later sections, it becomes a matter of there are a lot of limitations and rules on what needs to be done, and that limits the amount of things you could possibly do. So it's just a lot of elements together that are asking you more directly for your performance to be crisp and less figuring out random permutations. And so that's just going to be a matter of preference about how people feel. But I thought it was really well executed and a lot of fun. This is from an hour ago. Good thing I went to the gym today or this question wouldn't be here. Hashtag Mr. Fru Monday. Hello, Mr. Happy. Hi, and big congrats on your fruit clear. Thanks. This Ultimate was great to watch being raced, but cannot help but wonder one thing. Since Blue Mage didn't get Shockwave Pulse our last expansion, surely the devs will let us have Pandora's Box. That's funny because Blue Mage can't do Ultimates. So, no. You're not going to get it. Going back to the last question, they could technically make it like a Blue Mage exclusive skill, like, like you get it from totems, but they're not going to. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hey, Haps. Hi. I've been watching your Ultimate proc, and it's been both exciting and hard to watch at times, knowing a white means 10 plus minutes or 20 plus minutes. Was curious what your sessions look like in terms of playtime breaks, analysis, etc. Like, how many hours do you play in one sitting? We were playing, I think the shortest amount of time we played, other than on our clear day, was 14 hours total from our raid start time to end time. I think that was on day 2 or 3. We only went to 4 p.m. from starting at 2 a.m. That includes a 45 to 60 minute food break in the middle of the day, and any amount of 5 to 10 minute breaks in between, whether that be at the end of a lockout or somebody needing to use the restroom and us agreeing to do a group break in that time. So there's a lot of like little breaks. I'd say the total break time is probably 2 to 2.5 hours amongst the 14 to 16 hours we were going. And with just that one big break. We also would often end at 15 to 15.5 hours so that people would have 30 minutes to an hour to actually do something that wasn't sleep, whether that was, cook up a meal or Ivy. You're cleaning yourself mid-record. I can see you in the side over there. You have no shame at all. I can hear her doing it. So I was just like, Ivy's cleaning herself. And then I just looked. Yeah, and that was about it. Like, I bought a walking pad that I used on a few of the days. Just during the break time, I would just go for walking, get a few thousand steps in. And other people would like go outside and like walk around the block or make sure they had plenty of food cooked, or that, they had some sort of plan. There was a lot of making sure that everyone was doing something healthy. Analysis, I would factor in, and it really depends. Anytime we had a major wipe to a mechanic that was 10 plus minutes in, we would sometimes talk about it for 10 to 15 minutes to ensure that the mistake never happened again. Oh, this is the marking on the floor that we need to follow, or this is the timing you need to make sure that you have. Because any mistake, spending 10 to 15 minutes to make sure people almost never make a mistake again is better than beating your head against it for 10 to 15 minutes more to get to the same mechanic and die again and not learn anything. I think of it that way. And did we look at other racers? Our rule was not, we had ninths that were looking ahead, and we left it up to the individual players whether or not they would. But the general rule was not to talk too much about it. If you did know something, ahead of us getting there, like once we were there, our knights would usually step in and be like, okay, if a group had already done something and like they've seen it, we'd basically get a quick rundown, like, okay, start on this side of the room and like go this way and like kite this way, or like all stack up and then move together, and split up into groups on each side. Like that's like our knights would throw in that so we could just get a little further in that pull. We'd still likely wipe to that very first mechanic because we didn't know what we were doing. But that was the way we approached for it. And it worked. It worked really well. The idea was to stay as blind as we could until we saw something. And then if there was information available, we would either use it to develop our own strat or use the strat if we thought it worked as well as it did. And yeah, we got our clear in 5 days with that approach. It worked really well. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hi, Happy. Hi, this one's from 6 days ago, so this one's not a recent one. Question regarding the new Futures Rewritten Ultimate. How big is your fear that people cheat in the new Ultimate again? Oh, I mean, that's always going to happen. It stops making... They're never going to stop making Ultimates, like, just because people use plugins. Like, so first of all, they're never going to do that. Yoshi P says that they don't feel good and they have to question it, but they're never going to not do it. Like, it's one of those, you're not going to punish the many because of the actions of a few. Second... you can't, how do I put this the most succinct way possible? There are a lot of people using plugins in Final Fantasy XIV. I am one of the rare unicorns that isn't one of the people using it. Like, unless you really want to count Discord, and even then I have the overlay with the people's names and voices turned off because I think it's annoying. And then they're not going to stop making the content because of that. They would stop making all content under that principle because the Savage has it. People use AM and Savage. People do all sorts of things. They would not stop making Ultimates. Now, whether or not they make 2 an expansion you could argue maybe would fall into place, like as a potential concern. I think that's always going to be more of a resource thing, but it's always going to happen. Like, there's always going to be somebody using a plugin because there's nothing that the team can do about it. And also, they'll never install anti-cheat software because it's considered a privacy concern, and the game wouldn't even be allowed to be released in some countries if they installed an anti-cheat software that was scanning your PC. That was a major privacy concern that they are not willing to step on toes. He's never threatened not making ultimates. He has said that the team feels mildly like demotivated when they see that kind of behavior, because they have to go like, well, why are we making this if people are just going to cheat or people are just going to do this or that? But they're not going to not make it. Do you understand how bad that would be? People see ultimate content as content for the few. Fact of the matter is there's still a lot of people who do that content. It's not as small a number as people think. It's not that large of a number, but it's not as small of a number as people think either. Brings a lot of viewership to the game, brings a lot of eyes to the game, brings a lot of interest to the game. The whole Ultimate release is effectively a marketing event, same as the Savage stuff is. And the amount of people who actually complete it is, well, up to the number of people who have the willingness to complete it. And they're never going to deliberately do away with something that's effectively major marketing for their game that also pleases a subset of the fan base. That's never going to happen. Like, people could be like, oh, not that many people do it. Yeah, you know how many more people watch it, though? You know how many more eyes it gets? And how many more people go, oh, damn, Final Fantasy 14, this is pretty cool. I want to give this a shot. Even if they end up never doing an ultimate raid, they see the game and they go, wow, that's crazy. And they see all the little details. People who don't ultimate raid sometimes catch like the music details or the voice acting details, especially in this recent one. So they're not gonna not make it because they see people using plugins. They're just gonna ban or demean those people, or people will stop, or there will be less people using them than there were before, at least for the race stuff, and then the people who are going to use them are going to go back to using them after the race stuff is done. So that's never going to happen. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hi, Mr. Happy. Hi. This is about you mentioning that playing Path of Exile Early Access 2 weeks. Yes, it is this Friday, and since I am free from Ultimate, I will have plenty of time for it. Makes sense you're going for Monk, you're planning to go Elemental or Dark. So I liked one or two of the talent tree stuff that they showed for Dark, but I really liked basically everything I saw about Elemental. So I'm almost certainly going to be going Elemental. I have a few ideas based on some of the skills they showed off, the ones that I would definitely want to work towards. Especially movement heavy stuff. Very interesting that they said that Monk, while it had in their testing, was one of the most played. It was also one of the ones with the highest death rate, but was probably a pretty good choice for new players, and I think it's going to be a popular choice because, I expect to die a lot now. So I haven't played a lot of the original Path of Exile. I had issues with the way Path of Exile 1 was designed. It felt like, effectively, if I didn't have a guide right from the get-go, I was basically wasting my time trying to get into the game. I don't mind guides existing. Obviously, I make guides. But I don't think people who are recommending the game to you shouldn't also then be recommending guides for you to follow. To me, there needs to be a sense of discovery first. Sorry. There needs to be a sense of discovery first, and then guide following later. And while it's not really that hard to, do some economy stuff for Orbs of Regret, in order to fix that up, going to gold in a lot of the new systems in Path of Exile 2 are much more, new player friendly. They are definitely a lower barrier for entry, but they kept a lot of the complexity exactly the same, which is perfect. Why did that just turn on? My walking pad just became a ghost and turned on. I'm gonna have to unplug that, I guess, because that's scary. Yeah, and I've played a ton of Diablo. So, and dude, I've played a lot of isometric RPGs. I played the Van Helsing games. I played Last Epoch when it came out for a little bit. I played Torchlight, which depresses me to talk about because I had a lot of hopes for that franchise and did not go anywhere. So yeah, and I always go for monks. Well, except when Diablo 3 first came out, because going monk was a little scary. I definitely followed what was popular and went Demon Hunter when Diablo 3 first came out, because I could get to, the higher infernal axe, and Real Money Auction House was a thing, and if you were a Demon Hunter who could do Act 3 and 4, it made the Real Money Auction House that much better. if you were someone selling on it. If you were someone like me and you made a few grand out of the real money auction house, you were probably happy to be a demon hunter and be on the later chapters. So yeah, definitely went that way. I didn't see the hashtag, but I saw the hey haps how doing, so I figured might as well grab this one. Hi. I was wondering, when exactly does an enemy calculate its damage on delayed attacks? So it does depend attack to attack, but for the most part, it'll be when the cast bar finishes. Some attacks are very strange, like the cast bar can finish and the damage comes out like 20 seconds later from like some random source. It really depends, because sometimes a boss will cast something and that will create a new source point that does the actual attack that cannot be mitigated through targeted mitigation. So stuff like a reprisal or an addle or a feint wouldn't affect it. But then you just have like the standard. Like the standard is when the cast bar finishes, the damage mitigation is locked in. Wait, a guy trying to figure out why AA cheese frequently feels inconsistent. Cast bar finishes actually lands the attack. I don't know what you mean. What auto attack? Auto attack? Archangel? AA cheese? I'm not sure I understand what you mean by AA cheese. I don't know what you're referring to there. But yeah, it's on it's usually on when the cast bar finishes. It depends. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hiya, Happy. Hi. What do you expect to be the item level requirement for Chaotic Cloud of Darkness? 710. There's a lot of reasoning behind that I have. One is that it is being compared by Yoshi P to an extreme trial that has been kind of beefed up a little bit. In terms of difficulty, they said this specific one is a little harder than anticipated, so it's more like a first-tier Savage. And since Fiend Extreme released in 7.1 with a 710 minimum, I expect this will have a 710 minimum as well. We've also calculated out the health based on Yoshi P's little demo of hitting the boss to be about 318 million. He does about 318,000 for 0.01% of the HP. So you multiply that by 1,000. Is that the math? Something like that. And it turns out to be 318 million. That's a little less than 3 times the HP of M4S, if I recall correctly. So I expect this will probably be, about that with like an 11-ish minute in rage. Depends a little bit on the fight design, but yeah, an 11 to an 11.5 minute in rage is what I'm thinking is going to be the possible result. What it does mean is it means with a full set of 730, probably going to blast that fight, which to be fair is not too abnormal. I mean, that happens even with like Fiend Extreme and whatnot. Like you could practically skip the last ice mechanic if it weren't for the fact that it basically locks in. But you skip so much at the end of Fiend Extreme if you have like all the gear and you're like playing properly and you're not like raising people nonstop from the ice mechanics. So yeah, I expect 710 is going to be the minimum, which is easy. I mean, that's just weekly tombstone stuff effectively gets you there. A full set of crafted is 710, and then you can upgrade that to 720. So should just be that, yeah. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, Haps. Hi. Hope you're doing well and staying healthy after food. I actually just got back from the gym before I recorded this. Leg day. First thing I did was leg day. I took it a little easy because that's a hell of a day to go back to. But, you know, I'm feeling it already. My friend and I were questioning something and curious if you have any thoughts. How come there aren't really any co-op JRPG games, kind of like Persona and Metaphor, but 2-player? Can't think of a reason why there isn't any. Because there's not a whole lot of interaction between the player and the enemy. The actual gameplay interaction is a minimum. So there's no real reason to include a second player. There's no like important decisions they can make. There's nothing they can really do. Like you could technically build a Persona game with 2 protagonists and make both of you have your own answers that adjust the story. Doing that for 100 hours is a big ask. But then when you get to gameplay, it's like all you both can do is either make a good decision or a bad decision in battle. And I don't think that works for a JRPG. Like it just doesn't, like it works for something like Baldur's Gate because it's effectively a D&D campaign, and that's kind of what D&D is all about. It's all about, you know, you can make a decision because the character you've made for yourself is like rash or abrasive, and like you get into the characters. But with JRPGs, rarely are the characters a blank slate. Even when you have protagonists like Yuna Arakami and the other ones from the Persona franchise, they are still effectively a specific character where you can make a few decisions that are harsher or like meaner or nicer, but they still have a personality and they still are acting within the bounds of the character they've defined for you. So it doesn't make as much sense to basically have that sort of interaction and that cooperative experience, or to develop it as such. nor do I think it. I know that they don't want to, you know, you either have to have 2 people buy a $70 game in order to play together, or they need to have some sort of like discount to allow the second player to play, and they definitely don't want to do that. Even if it is like couch co-op, a lot of the time they're just like, just make a single player experience. Every person who wants to experience it buys the game, 60, 70 bucks, move on with our life. And that's why. There are a few, and even some of the old like SNES and yeah, the SNES era, or even like PlayStation era RPGs. Some of them are 2-player, but it's such a shallow second player experience that it might as well not exist. And I don't think you're going to be seeing any sort of popularity hike on this concept within JRPGs anytime in the near future. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy 1227, spelled all the way out. First off, hello, hi. Second, congrats on the clear. Thanks. We'll be doing a thoughts on the raid as a whole now that you're done. Yeah, so I mentioned that at the start of the video. Obviously, I have a lot to say about that, and I actually spent an entire 7-hour stream talking about it, but I'm going to make a more condensed video specifically for YouTube. I do want to let my voice rest a little bit because I've been streaming for 16 hours a day and then streamed again today, and, you know, I'm recording this now, so I maybe want to wait another day. Like maybe the day you're seeing this, I'm probably recording the video to release on Tuesday. And yes, I have seen the Enrage at P5. I have seen the bad endings, and I did upload them to YouTube as well. So if you want to see them, be sure to check them out. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hey, Haps. Hi. I was just too late last week to ask it, so I'll ask this week. Cool. While I've been doing EX3 and Party Finder for far too long at 125 clears, I want them out bad. Bless your soul. I've noticed a certain interesting fact is that ninjas can teleport over the ice bridges without breaking them, even if someone else is walking across at the same time. Do you know why this is the case? It sounds like a ping thing, because we know for a fact that ninja, its axes for Shukuchi, it doesn't skip any spot. If you teleport over something that is dangerous, it can and will hit you. However, the server tick determining whether you're in danger doesn't necessarily recognize that you were in that spot when it was checking for it. Different things check at different paces. So some things check very frequently and some things don't check as often. So like there's cases of like, let's say Emerald Weapon. Sometimes for Emerald Weapon, I'll just run directly through the middle of the room when Emerald is doing the spinny mechanic, because I can just get away with it sometimes. Like it's also like when people would jump over the orb in the near raids. It's not so much that you're jumping over it, it's that your position check didn't align with a server tick and you effectively missed the you missed the impact in some capacity. It's a really, really weird thing. Shukuchi, that's really all that's happening, is that it's happening so fast. The server at times may not have the opportunity to check to see that the ninja is in that position. I promise you, if you do it enough times, it will 100% break the bridge if somebody is already on it. But it will not happen every single time because you may not get a positional check, especially because it's not a persisting AoE. It is a ground location. You're more likely to get away with it than you would with the game constantly checking your position on a ground AoE, or on any AoE, I suppose. The same would happen with other dashes if you were lucky enough. Shukuchi just happens to travel very, very fast. And you can also tell that it checks your ground position while you're doing it because you can't Shukuchi over the open gaps. It's because the open gaps are checking a lot more consistently for your location because a player's not supposed to be there. Whereas the bridges are built with the idea that a player is going to be there and it just needs to make sure. Okay, so E9S, the platforms that break if 2 people are on them, if you catch a server tick at a good time, you can see the platform light up as if it's about to be destroyed, and it won't be destroyed. And it's effectively the same thing happening here. It's just really, really fast. So I would not trust it all the time. It's just something that can happen. Hashtag Monday after Ultimate Prog with Mr. Happy. It's funny you say after Ultimate Prog, because you didn't know I'd be done with it already when you asked this. Hi, Haps. Hope your prog has been going well. Thank you and hello. Congrats on the clear if you got it. And if not, maybe it's just around the corner. Thank thank you. I did get it. Got one question. Would you like to have the ability to change skill animations freely after getting an upgrade? I've been discussing with my friend how a lot of new skill effects in DT now, many of them are sonically muted or not satisfying. Looking at you, Elixir Burst. Personally, I would love the ability to choose either the base animation or the upgraded one rather than having them locked into certain level ranges. I think it's criminal that Shadow Bite on Bard is considered the upgrade over Wide Volley. Yeah, I was immediately thinking of Wide Volley actually as I was reading this. They'd have to develop the system for it, but it is one of those features that as long as they're willing to develop it, they probably should allow. I don't think they can argue against like confusion, for example. Like sometimes they'd be like, oh, it could be visually confusing to be max level and see the low level animation, but no, it's who cares? Most people have animations turned off. Yeah, this is a system people have actually been wondering about since they started doing upgrade style things. And as long as they're willing to put in the big question is, would they put in the UI work and the system work to allow it? Because there's nothing in the game that effectively connects them in that way that allows them to be interchangeable. So it does need to be developed within the game itself to allow it. It's not like a simple switch that can be flipped. So yeah, but if they're willing to go through that and if there's enough demand for it, they would probably do it. And I think they could and should. You know, it's one of those harmless things that just gives players just a way to enjoy the game, just that tiny bit more. And they are really big on that kind of quality of life. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, Mr. Happy. Hi. Hope all is well with you and yours. Just wondering why they haven't ever added Cloud's Buster Sword into the game as Glam. I have my Dark Knight as Cloud, and I sure would like to have his iconic weapon. Do you have the hairstyle? Because the hairstyle being a reward from, like, the contests would make you one of few. So that would be pretty neat. Thanks again, and keep up the great work. Thanks. There's no particular reason why. They've just probably seen it as, I don't know. It depends, because, like, stuff like Squall's Gunblade, for example, they're iconic to Squall, but they don't have the same visual factor, I suppose. Like, the Buster Sword is very in your face. It's very specific to Cloud, whereas as iconic as Squall's Gunblade is to him, it's not like that iconic to the point where it's a huge deal that it gets added, right? Like, you get Gunbreaker in the game, it's expected that you'll get it. Dark Knight isn't inherently a Buster Sword job, so it's not. Buster Sword and Dark Knight are more like a combination that makes sense because the Buster Sword is a big sword and Dark Knights have a big sword. So I would assume the only reason is they see it as maybe a bit too, I don't know, visually intrusive to the game as something that's like so clearly Final Fantasy VII, which doesn't mean they wouldn't do it. Obviously, we have other Final Fantasy weapons that match and outfits that very clearly are taken right from their game. I mean, we had the 16 collab not long ago. If anything, I'd assume they want to save it for a collaboration, in all honesty. Even the Rebirth director has said he does want to do a collaboration with 14. And that he regularly spends time with Yoshi P talking about like the future of the franchise and stuff like that. And that he does want to do it. I think they were really just waiting for the third part of the 7 like remake Rebirth series before they do it. And that almost certainly when the time comes, that's when they'll do it. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. This is one from today. Hi. I was discussing some stuff with my friends about raiding, and at some point you were mentioned, really want to know 2 things. All right, 1, why do you consider Savage Raid a mid-core style content? I have the theory that's because you're actually so good at the game that everything below Ultimate seems brain dead for people like you. So Savage is meant to be one of the only few hard contents in the game prior to Endwalker, which did actually add a lot more stuff that I would say, like Criterion Normal is great if you're someone who's newer to the raid scene and you don't really want to commit to 8 people. But Savage at this point is not that much of a step over Extreme. I'd say that Extremes and the first 1 or 2 Savage fights are interchangeable in difficulty. It really depends on the patch. It really depends on the individual raid tier. But because of that, they all together act as some sort of entry point into endgame for Final Fantasy XIV. The 3rd and 4th fights in tiers are often more considerable gaps and challenges that people have to overcome. Again, varying. Sometimes that's more or less true. You know, you look at P10, and P10 is arguably harder than P11. It's almost inarguable, but I'll say arguably, just because, you know, 2nd tier versus 3rd tier. Second fight in that tier versus 3rd fight in that tier. Whereas Ultimate is a very clear major jump up. Stuff like Criterion Savage is a very clear major jump up. And so I feel like Hardcore is strictly reserved for that extra level where the amount of commitment is honestly beyond what I think is, I'll even say what's beyond reasonable for the average person. It's not even about skill It's entirely about the commitment to getting through said thing. And I think the level of commitment needed for extremes, entry-level savages especially, and even like stuff like first savages in an expansion, is generally a lot better. Because the game just doesn't have enough tools to get you from I do dungeons, I do my roulettes every day, to I'm going to do savage. So they kind of just, it kind of just is like a sharp incline from all that content into those things. And those things just have to fit the mid-core. Whereas the ultimates are just above that. Like Uwu is like in that range kind of mid-core, just because it's been power crept and mechanically crept over time. And Yukab and Uwu we've outscaled, so like they are in that like slightly above category where it's not like one category that exists, right? Oh, this is ultimate, this is hardcore. It's like there's layers within that, and it's same with the mid-core, like extremes, first and second savages versus third and fourth savages, criterion savages, kind of bridging that gap up into ultimate. So they've filled things in here or there. I'd even say things like the duels and Bozia are really more mid-core content, because they're asking for a player to perform on a much higher level than the rest of that content asks for, and to use the tools that they've actually given you. So there's more mid-core activities than I think people give credit for, and they just don't really factor them in. Even stuff like BA and Delubrum Regine Savage kind of fit that bill a lot better, but they're just places where there's clear steps up in difficulty, but they're not crazy time commitment level stuff like Ultimate can be. Two, now that all the conversation about third-party tools has been refreshed, where do you stand on ACT? I think, so ACT, I think the base idea of knowing how much damage that you are doing in an encounter, it should be considered pretty much a standard thing. What started happening over the years is ACT effectively became your knife band calling out mechanics for some people that wanted to use it for that, and it became a very standard thing. It was just, and for me, I always found it really, really weird. Like, people would always justify the use of it, and compared to some of the other stuff that exists, you know, like Deadly Boss mods existing in WoW is really where people kind of look at ACT doing that and go, what the hell, that's not that big a deal. But it was always just weird to me to try to automate certain things in such a way where it's like you wanted to interact with the game less. But it's advantageous to know that information, but it's also information that should just be standard. I think anybody who's ever played any sort of raid or any game that involves numbers or self-improvement would see the strict logs aspect of it as a self-improvement tool. Now, that being said, every tool has its uses, and not every use is the intended one. So the fact that people use it in a sense to kind of breach information that they don't necessarily get from the game. And I'm not referring to your numbers. I'm referring to, again, well, okay, but see, I was going to use an example, and I realized that we now have that function in the game. Seeing damage types. Like, for example, there's no reason why the game took forever to really give us solid in-game information about what damage type an attack is. ACT had that information ages ago, and it was what people use in order to obtain, oh, is this attack physical? Is this attack magical? Now we have that information in game, and so that kind of function isn't really needed. People want to know their DPS. We don't have that function in game. You can go beat on a Stone Sky Sea dummy, but we just don't have it. So it serves as a necessary evil in that particular regard in terms of self-improvement and getting better. And self-improvement tools are usually a good thing. It's really a lot of the other stuff that's come out that gets, it's great. Yeah. But you can honestly, you don't need ACT. So you say at the time you spend casting skills, movement, skill usage, time management, you don't need ACT for that. You can go through your own footage and do that yourself. What it does is expedite the process. It is a summary that doesn't naturally occur within the game, but the summary is you just recording your gameplay and looking at it. If that's the information you wanted, you could record yourself doing a fight and literally just play it back and just make notes. And it would effectively achieve the same thing. This is basically a text format that gives you that end result without you needing to do it. So it basically expedites that process. But I will say this. They should at this point just give people a personal DPS meter. I understand, yeah, if you have that, people are just going to ask for it when they want you to do raids. Listen, people want to see your logs anyway. They already want to. They're already doing it. So it doesn't make a difference if you have a personal log. So ACT is like the one tool specifically for knowing what your damage is that I think is acceptable. And it's funny I say that because I haven't had ACT in literally since like right before Endwalker came out. It hasn't been on my PC. Like I'll go check my logs when other people post them, but like the one, like it's like the one thing I think is like reasonable to have, and I don't even have it. Like that's how vanilla I am at this point. I'm so lame, but like it is what it is. But specifically ACT, yeah, that's like the one where that's information the player should have, and it shouldn't be secret. And I don't agree with it not being like built into the game, and that's why I'm glad at least the damage type thing has been worked into the game. All right, I think we're coming down to the last few. I've been spending a lot of time answering these questions. It's longer than I thought it would be. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hello, Happy. Hi. Hope the ultimate is going well. Went as well as possible. Why is Dark Astral Machinist still locked behind Heaven's Word? Because they just, that's where they are. Like, that's the answer. It's, they're there. They're tied into those things. All of their quests are locked into locations that require Heaven's Ward. Like even if they unlocked in the 3 starting cities, they'd have to change their entire quest log to make their quests doable in the first place, which is probably not the greatest thing either. So yeah, that's not gonna change. I wish they would. I think it would be smart too, especially given that you get to 50 and you can get the Stormblood jobs, but the Heaven's Ward jobs, no, dude, you gotta wait till you actually get to Ishgard. Although there is something to be said about it being really cool when you are finally able to make it to a new location for the first time, to have those new job unlocks there. There is somewhat of a really cool, like, kind of world like consistency with that, instead of all of these things that are from other nations like making their way to your, like, to the starting cities. As good as it is for gameplay, it's kind of weird that they keep doing it, you know? Like, it's just one of those things. It's horrible. Realm Reborn is so slow and tedious to go through. So it's funny, I have gone through a Realm Reborn post change. I've gone through Heaven's Ward as it is. A Realm Reborn's faster than some of the other expansions by a considerable amount now. So, I understand what you mean. It's more like the story and stuff. The starting experience just 8 to 10 hours to reach Tasha. That's not accurate. And I have the math to prove it. You gotta remember, I have played through A Realm Reborn both with all the cutscenes and without all the cutscenes, both pre-rework and post-rework, and I have entire videos on those things. And I know I released one on Heaven's Ward, but I never got around to doing it for Stormblood. So no, it's pretty much in line with all the expansions now. It's just not, it doesn't have the, A, the cinematic value until close to the end, and B, the, it's just not as well done as a whole. Even though it's technically the same amount of time as most of the other expansions at this point, with Dawn Trail being kind of the exception, because Dawn Trail has the fastest, like, by far. It's still, no, it's in line. Yeah. Hashtag Mondays with the Happy. Hello, hi. Hope Ultimate Prog has not been too hard on you. That's all good. Let's ask about Viper versus Reaper today. I picked up my first melee DPS Viper. At the start of the expansion, was really fun with it, doing some really high numbers recently. I thought I'd been playing around with other melee, really fell in love with Reaper. Knowing I can work to tighten up my rotation, still hitting, I'm not hitting nearly the same numbers as Viper. So Viper, it really depends on fight design. Generally speaking, it doesn't really matter. People just play who they are. Like play whatever they want, and you know your job's either, you know, one of the best jobs or it's just kind of there. Viper was everybody's, you know, bread and butter for a while, and it's still very, very popular. And there's plenty of people who play Reaper as well. I was watching somebody do their Fru clear. They have a Reaper, and Reaper's not considered a great job for that fight in a lot of regards. Viper is probably one of the worst performers at the moment in the new Ultimate. But doesn't stop people from, you know, bringing it in if they want to bring it in. It's just, you know, all the hardcore people are looking at that type of information. They're like, oh, you know, based on this, this, and this, and the performance, like, why would I not play something else if I'm comfortable playing something else? So you can't really use the early week information on whether or not a job is worth playing, not worth playing, because the bottom line is you can play any job in any content, and it's going to be perfectly fine. So I would just say whichever you're having more fun with, play. If you enjoy both, play both. And that really, your considerations don't really need to be much past that. No hashtag, but I see we're kind of we're getting close to the bottom. I see one more question basically below this one. Hola, Senor Feliz. Hi. Now we have all the MSQ dungeons playable with NPCs. Do you see the MSQ roulette existence is still necessary? Yeah, people like roulettes. People want more roulettes. There are people who play this game just to play roulettes every day. You wouldn't want to take away a roulette especially with the amount of EXP you get from it. Like the rewards in the MSQ roulette are a lot of the reasons why people do it. Just because you can do it with trust doesn't mean people don't want to do roulettes. And MSQ is definitely one of the like more done ones. They removed it and distributed its rewards across other roulettes. That's not how this works. You can't just delete a roulette and add what it gave to the other roulettes. The MSQ roulette is one of the earlier roulettes you get. If you're a new player and you get that and you really like the rewards from it while you're level 50, 51, 52, you're going to want access to that immediately. You take that away, you've got leveling roulette, frontline roulette, and then as you unlock side dungeons, you'll get the like high level roulette or whatever it's called. The level 50, which isn't very good for leveling, mind you. So it's not even really a good idea to get. Yeah, you're effectively just, that doesn't work. You can't just distribute its rewards elsewhere and be like, just get rid of it. Some people like just honestly hopping in there, doing 20 to 20. Maybe they get Porta Decumana and they like that, or they just do Praetorium and they just like throw Netflix up on the side and they pick up a huge number of rewards. Especially, not even just the tones. Again, the leveling is really the big thing that comes with this. So there's no value to the game to remove the main scenario roulette. It just takes value away. And this is the last question. There is one below it, but it just doesn't have anything. It's just like a statement. So this is going to be the last one. Hashtag Ultimate Happy Monday. Hi. What do you think about potentially introducing shared fates to expansions prior to Shadowbringers? I think they will help with relic grinds, creating more rewards in Orchestra. Well, I don't know how they help with relic grinds, because they'd have to retroactively incorporate. Like, I know you're saying, like, the Atma step of, or I guess the book step, but like they don't help with the grind. They don't make it faster. It just, there's now another reward built on top of the thing you already would have had to have done for like the Atma step. The problem is rewards. Like, my favorite is the Ixal Crafting Tribe OST. Does that really not have an Orchestrion role? Yeah, but then why would they not just add that to the Ixal themselves? You know what I mean? Like the problem is the rewards. They'd have to retroactively go back and make rewards with that system in mind. And they'd have to just make brand new ones, realistically. What they could do at like say they add shared fates for a Realm Reborn. And as you're doing them, you get gemstones. You can get like a gear set that scales with the level, from 1 to 50. They've said they don't want to do stuff like that. I'm just spitballing. So because they probably wouldn't do that, you could just make individual gear sets available through fates. So if people are leveling and that's the way they really want to level, especially their alternate jobs, if they want to stop doing MSQ for something, you have that option. Same with Stormblood. Stormblood could especially use it because, like I mentioned last week, the leveling in Stormblood is not good. Heavensward, there's no reason that they can't, other than the amount of work it would take, which, they have to effectively redevelop the system for those. They can't flip a switch and suddenly there's shared fates in the earlier zones. There has to be built out. NPCs have to be added, programmed into the game, QA, all that has to happen. But at the same time, it would be a fine thing to do. Like if a new player finds out about that system early, they understand it exists before getting to Shadowbringers. That's good. That's a good thing for the game. It's a good thing for content. It's a good thing for people who maybe want to go back and collect the old rewards, collect old achievements, which people always want to do. So, but it's just not something that's so... Is it really worth their time? Does adding fates to the old areas actually improve the new player experience? Are existing players going to be that interested in it? Is it cost effective? Is all they're probably wondering. And the answer is probably no. As much as I would be okay with it, I don't think it is. But still, if we're going to get another Monster Hunter collab, I wish Prance will be an emote reward. I don't know. I don't think I've almost ever used the Monster Hunter emote, so I don't know what that one looks like. Not going to lie. I kill the monsters, and that's the end of it for me. All right, so that's going to be a wrap for this week's episode of Mondays with Mr. Happy. Glad I could bring you a normal one. Seeing if I can get a State of the Realm ready this week before Path of Exile. Fantasia comes out on Thursday, so maybe I want to do it before then, or... I definitely don't want to wait till Friday, because Path of Exile 2 being on Friday means Friday is for Path of Exile 2. But I do want to get a State of the Realm out. I got to see about getting participants. I have an idea of some people who I want to invite onto the show. So I'll probably reach out to them in the next day or so and see how they feel about it. So either way, thanks for asking your questions in the comment section. Again, if you have one, ask it down there with the hashtag or some hashtag of some variant that gets my attention. It seems everyone's got all sorts of creative ones nowadays. And thanks everyone for enjoying the Ultimate Prog and for cheering us on and for the congratulations. I'll see you in some of the videos about Fru this week. And until then, I bid you adieu. Bye-bye.